Hello and welcome to the Innovation Series. We are going to speak about structured brainstorming. This is that part of the design thinking arc that, having figured out what problem you're trying to solve, allows you to come up with many different concepts in order to populate the space with different types of approaches that then you can figure out what to do with. You can down select, you can prototype, etc. But coming up with a lot of options given this a small set of questions is actually easier than you would imagine. If you just trick your mind into the right kind of rules, it turns out that any of us, if we get together in a room with 5 people, we walk in empty-handed with a room full of whiteboards or the table full of blank paper, and all we have are some pencils or pens in our hand, no printed material, no knowledge, pre-knowledge that we've actually had to read up on and so on. You can call people down the hallway from you, you can call people who are experts, but once you get a group of people together, a small number of people, 5 to 7 people, you can use these rules, the rules that I'm going to tell you about, and come up with roughly 100 ideas in an hour. Okay, and this is something I've done a million times, and I can tell you it works every time. So first and foremost, what is conceptualizing, or what is structured brainstorming? This is a structured way in order to come up with ideas very rapidly. And it's structured, it has some rules, and it's team-based. It's not you sitting alone in a dark corner trying to struggle with coming up with ideas. You use the energy that comes together when you have people in the room and you've all got excited about the problem, and then the ideas just keep flowing. Okay? Now, the best way to have a good idea is to generate a whole lot of ideas. So I'm quoting Linus Pauling, who won the Nobel Prize in 1954. So if you want a good idea, don't sit down and try to come up with a good idea. Come up with 50 ideas, come up with 100 ideas, because one of those ideas will be good, all the rest might be rubbish. But because of the elegance and the economy with which you can come up with ideas, if you don't come up with a good idea after having spent an hour of a brainstorm, have another brainstorm, maybe the next day, right? So there are more ideas than where they came from, and one should never hold on to that one idea thinking that I'm never going to have an idea as good as this, because ideas can be, once you learn how to generate ideas quickly, there's an infinite store of good ideas. Okay? Now, when you come together, you might use these post-its or stickies, or you might use a scribe to list down a bunch of ideas. But what you're looking at on the screen is probably a fourth of the number of ideas that have been generated in one single 1-hour brainstorm session. So you bring 6 or 7 people together, and if you do a rapid fire brainstorm, you should come up with many ideas. So what are the rules of brainstorming? How can you trick your mind into coming up with so many ideas? This is the most important rule, which is defer judgment. There is no such thing as a bad idea. What we are trying to do in a structured brainstorm is separating two things. The part of the mind that comes up with ideas and generates ideas gets killed by the part of the mind that judges ideas. So if I come up with a good idea and the person sitting next to me says, we tried that before, it didn't quite work, or yeah, that's an okay idea, it's not that great, the chances are that I'm not going to be able to come up with any more good ideas. My creativity has just plummeted. What's much more useful to do is to, for an entire hour, all you're doing is coming up with ideas, even though they are ridiculous and funny or outlandish or what have you. You're just coming up with the ideas and recording them all very dutifully. And then right after that, the brainstorm is over, the people who are managing the project and the decision makers are selecting the ideas and, if necessary, throwing them all out, but looking for that 1 or 5 really good ideas out there. Okay? So defer judgment, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Okay? Second one is, it's actually important to encourage a little bit of a wild and crazy idea, because there is such a state in one's mind which we call play state. So if you think of yourself of how you are when you are dancing at a party or you're playing a game with some 5-year-olds, you are not being the same person that you are in a classroom or a boardroom or in a very important meeting. You are much more relaxed. You are making jokes. You're thinking in flexible ways. It is that part of the mind that you want to be able to co-opt during the brainstorm. So it's actually really good if somebody comes up with a crazy idea, because you can use some of that energy or that idea as a seeding function to come up with a more sensible idea, right? Now, that leads me to the third point, which is you're not wearing blinkers and coming up with ideas all by yourself. You're listening to other people's ideas and you're building on other people's ideas. So the trick is, instead of saying but or no, what you say is yes and. So if someone says that, hey, let's say that you're working on a new way of transporting medication that has to be held within a certain temperature condition, or else the medication might go bad, and you're thinking about what can be done. And someone says, hey, you know what, we should create an entire business on ice cream and just put ice and stick the medication in the ice cream, because people will look after the ice cream. They might not look after the medication. It's a crazy idea, right? But it's an idea that someone will say, yes, so what are other cold things that are transported that are worth a whole lot more, that people will not allow to get warm? Can we piggyback on that? So that ice cream idea has led you to a better idea, right? So because this activity often gets fun and loud and kind of like a party, is really important to stay focused on the topic. So the facilitator allows the conversation to go a little off topic and then pulls it back to the problem at hand, okay? Now, one thing that is super important is that you cannot have multiple conversations. So the way this works is, you're sitting around a table, 5 or 7 people, that's a pretty good idea, good number, because everybody then gets airtime. And each person has a pen in their hand and a paper in their hand. That's the best way of doing it. Or you have a scribe who's writing all the ideas down. And you're coming up with the ideas simultaneously. So it's not you're writing your ideas, and then you read out your idea for everybody to hear. And if it's on a sticky, it gets put on a wall, or if it's on a paper, it gets taped to the wall, what have you. But you're not explaining your idea in great detail. You're taking up very little airtime, and you're coming up with the idea, then somebody else goes, then somebody else goes, and you're parallel processing everybody's airtime so that you can come up with many ideas, right? It's very, very useful to be visual. So if you can draw it, even if it's a sketch, it's you come up with a tiny little stick figure and make a drawing, because then later on it's better to you can understand what people came up with, and when you're visual, you think a little better, right? Now, this is a little counterintuitive, but when you want a really good idea, you actually, instead of trying to come up with a good idea, just try to come up with as many ideas as possible. If you just go for quantity and you say, we will come up with 100 ideas, then your mind goes free and you come up with many creative ideas. It is easier to rein in creative ideas that have some good potential than take a boring idea and try to make it more exciting. So this is the time to actually have some really big creative leaps and escape the current frame. And one of the tricks for that is just going for quantity, right? And once you're coming up with the idea, it's a good habit to make a little title for it. So you're giving it a certain kind of a name. Now, we talked in the design thinking module, we talked about the arc, the design thinking arc, about how you go from understanding the problem to synthesizing all the information and the insights, to framing the problem, to creating design directives, brainstorming, this is where you come up with many ideas, and then prototyping the answers and testing the answers and keeping on going. Now, we also talked about how there are different modalities. You can do divergent thinking or convergent thinking. This is an example where the structured brainstorm methodology is completely built on divergent thinking. So what it means is that given a question, you're going out and generating many ideas, and after the brainstorm is over, you're going to pivot and select the ones that make sense to do. But what is this question? Where did this question come from? This question came from the insights that you generated during need finding and framed it as what is it that you would really like to achieve, and what are the changes that you would like to achieve, and then you've turned them around into how might we statements. So that example that I used about transporting drugs in hot weather, you would say, how might we transport drugs without getting them spoiled, right? Or how might we not allow the drug to go above a certain temperature? Or how might we detect that the drug has gone above a certain temperature? These are all different aspects of the problem. But you say, how might we? And often we say HMW. So to repeat, the structured brainstorm is a tool. It is a very, very simple and very effective tool. You can teach your 5-year-old kids and your 10-year-old kids to do it really effectively. In fact, they'll probably be better than you. And you bring a group of people together, ask them how might we question. As long as they follow the rules and have fun, you'll come up with a large number of ideas. That is my guarantee. Thank you.